Hey everybody, with the recent release of the FORMulator, we wanted to do a quick walkthrough of the product, kind of start at the beginning. So put together a nice little website, had some fun with this, as you can you can probably see. At a high level, kind of walks you through what its capabilities are, some nice screenshots, a quick little walkthrough video, but not as deep as we're going to go now. Some FAQs, and where to request the download. So pretty straightforward. Download it, install it. It's just a Windows desktop app. It's got a cert attached to it, so you shouldn't run into any Windows Smart Screen issues. Download it, install it, and you should be good to go. So with that, let's kind of walk through a demo. So landing page, brief kind of summary of what it's doing, kind of how it's going about its analysis. So it's really gonna, whether it's SharePoint Online or SharePoint on premises, it's going to scan those lists and libraries, look for published InfoPath templates. Anybody that's played around with an XSN file knows it's a CAB file, so we open it up, pull out all its constituent parts, flatten all the data schemas, and then DOM walk the actual the actual HTML to find all the controls, and then we look at all the controls, put them in kind of context, put everything together, and kind of score everything. So without further ado, let's just kind of walk through it. So as I mentioned, you can do on premises or online. We'll hit one of our lab environments here, and you can see it kind of walks you through the process, right? It gives you all the URLs, go here, gives you the different values to copy. Then you go there, you get here's the permission XML payload to put in there. So we're going to do an admin, we're going to grant permissions to the admin URL, which will allow us to scan the entire tenant. And let's grab the client secret we have set up, and then you start scan. So this tenant, I believe, has about a dozen different site collections. So it's just going to kind of go through them. There's 20-30 forms out there. So it takes about a minute and a half, 2 minutes to do a site, a tenant of this size. Let's just let it finish running. So what it's doing is, once it finds one, it's running it through our pre-flight analysis API. So it's not actually generating what we call a uniform model, converting the form into our universal model, so you can then turn around and write it out as a K2 Smart Form, a Power App, SharePoint hosted, so we can do in-place migrations with our own runtime. So you can see it came back, over here, 27 forms, and this is a portability grade. So this is saying, okay, based on what we know of InfoPath capabilities and what we know of our own capability to kind of read what's in InfoPath, and then ultimately what we can do on the destination, regardless of which destination you choose. This is kind of how portable is this form. So 14 of the forms, a little bit more than 52%, were what we would call an A, so 90% or plus, right? These are going to be your simpler forms, and we can kind of get into that a little bit more down at the bottom. 7 were B's, 2 were C's, 1 was D, and 3 were F. The F's are going to be the ones that probably aren't going to port over real well, and you'll see why when we get down here. And then by complexity, again, this has somewhat less to. This is a different way of looking at the portability, right? You could have a highly portable form that's very complex given its size, right? It might have a dozen views, it might have several hundred fields. So it's just a question of time, right? It's going to take you time to rebuild that in a destination platform. So it might be really easy to do because it doesn't have any nested repeaters, it doesn't have any code behind, It doesn't have what we call interactivity rules, rules that kind of show and hide sections, or show or hide controls, or make, control, visibility, editability, things of that nature. And then when we get into kind of the details, you can see why some of these scored the way they scored. So we'll use this production requisitions as an example. 12 views, which is pretty high. Moderate level of fields, has a lot of repeaters, has a ton of interactivity rules, and it has nested repeaters. And nested repeaters are kind of a kill switch to a large extent, because they are extremely difficult, if not impossible, to kind of replicate in a target platform. So they kind of knock the score down pretty heavily on their own. But this has a lot of things that are gonna make it hard to, as it's currently constructed, right? This is a form that's probably a candidate for refactoring. And then you've got some other ones here. This one, performance evaluations. We got this one from a customer down in Virginia. Huge form, 377 fields, but it's only got a couple views. It has no repeaters, only one interactivity rule. So it scored well from a portability standpoint, but it's high from a complexity standpoint because it's so large. It's very input dense. And then you get down to some of these other Fs, and again, you can see why, right? Nested repeaters, a lot of interactivity rules, a lot of views. We kind of knock down the grade a little bit if you have code behind, but we find most times that code behind is easily replaced by scripting of some form or rules capability in the destination platform. So it doesn't mean the form won't port. It's just there's going to be some manual work that has to be done, so it makes it a little bit less portable than it otherwise might be. So once we have all this data, and we've kind of gone through it and are comfortable with what we're seeing, we can flip over to the ROI calculator and start to look at really kind of what the value of our offering is, right? So there's cost associated with doing this manually. There's still some manual effort, kind of last mile work has to be done in some cases. Some cases, some of the lower complexity, higher portability forms might go across to a Power App or a K2 Smart Form without any additional effort. They're kind of ready to go. Others are going to take a little bit extra work. So you can see by the graph here, we're saying there's a pretty significant savings, even with adding the cost of our software into that equation. And then you can kind of go into the details, and we kind of break it down by low, medium, and high complexity, what we think the kind of engineering or form engineer, software engineer, whatever engineer type you want to call it, to do that work, what the cost of that is, versus the hours we would attribute to the labor cost associated with any post Kudzu migration work. And then we kind of estimate ballpark what our license would be. So kind of just at a high level, without going and playing with any of the assumptions, we're saying, hey, you'll save almost 30 grand, 125-ish% ROI in the first year. And again, you can come over here and play with the assumptions. So we're basically saying it's going to take you 2 man days to convert a low complexity form by hand, 32 hours for a medium complexity, and 64 hours for a high complexity. And then kind of what the manual effort or last mile effort would be, if you had Kudzu involved in that. Play with the numbers. So we threw 60 out there as kind of a blended rate. We're not putting any project management overhead on that. So if you wanted to say 10-15% for a business analyst, a project manager to kind of manage the overall project, you could do that, and it obviously affects the numbers in favor of having kind of an automation assisted effort. So again, play with those. If the numbers still look good, we have a nice little next step tab here. You can click on this one. It'll bring you to our Microsoft bookings page. or you can go in and just say, hey, give me 30 minutes, and this is basically availability of someone on our team on any one of these days. So you might get me, you might get Eric, you might get Ron, you might get somebody else on the team, depending on who's available in that time slot. But just kind of here's the company, here's the product. Let's talk about what your requirements are, what your challenges are, and see if there aren't some concrete next steps to see if we can help you with your InfoPath remediation project. And then after that, it stores your scan history, so you can kind of go back and open it. And then we also added this export feature, so you can basically go in and save the entire thing to an Excel spreadsheet. So here's all the data formatted like it was in the app. Here it is in a nice sortable, filterable data table, so you can kind of look at this and say, hey, I just want to look at the the high complexity ones. And then it's also got the ROI calculator built in. You can play with the numbers. So let's say I want to double this, 28, 12, 14. And you can kind of see, if you get into the the hundreds, the numbers start to get kind of crazy. The efforts get big on some of this stuff, right? You're looking at a few $100,000 potentially to convert that many InfoPath forms with that kind of complexity split, with a significant savings by leveraging our software to kind of assist in a good chunk of that migration effort. And this costs the calculator doesn't even touch on data migration, right? So one of the things we do is we can extract the data out of all those InfoPath XML payloads, pull them into Kudzu, and ship them across to whatever the destination is. So if you wanted to move this stuff into K2 Smart Objects, or you wanted to move it into Dataverse entities, we could do that. If it's already sitting in a SharePoint list broken out into columns versus stored as the XML payload, we could do just a in-place migration. So one day it's a InfoPath form, the next day it's our uniform model runtime, or it's a Power App, or a K2 Smart Form. We actually have a few customers in our pipeline that want to do exactly that. So that's it. Oh, and again, everything else in here. So kind of the summaries by grade, summary by complexity, and again, you can change any of the assumptions and play around with the numbers. Take the spreadsheet, share it with your teammates, decision makers. We think it's very powerful information at a minimum, right? Even if you get at the end of this and say, hey, it's not for us, we don't have the budget to do it, it's information that you can use to make some informed decisions. It's not a thumbs in the air anymore. We don't know how many forms we have. We don't know how complex they are. We really don't know how long it's going to take for us to do this, or what the cost is going to be. This gives you some real numbers and gives you the tools to kind of play with it. So that's it. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you find this helpful. At a minimum, download it, try it out, and if you think there's value, reach out.